Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Mairead O'Driscoll, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to our third HRB Ones to Watch conference. This event is always a highlight in our calendar because it's a great opportunity to showcase the potential of emerging health researchers. And of course, it's also an opportunity to provide advice and support in terms of developing a career in health research. This year especially, it's really important to get together and just take a bit of time out to reflect, because the last 18 months has been pretty tough for everyone. Our event today is all about potential. Certainly, as we emerge from the shadow of COVID, we can look back with some pride, I think, at the contribution that health research has made on an international stage and the impact it's had on people's lives. But we also have to look forward with real hope in terms of lessons learned and the progress made. And I know that one of our panels will discuss that later today. Earlier this year, the HRB published our 5-year strategy, and one of the strategic objectives we've identified is to build a strong and supportive environment for health research in Ireland. And a key part of that is supporting people and nurturing talent. It's about working to ensure that funding and support for Ireland's health researchers and for research infrastructure are delivered effectively, and that research is conducted to the highest standard of governance, quality, and ethics. A key theme running through the conference today is research culture. This is an important theme now internationally. Science Europe, for example, has identified research culture as one of its main policy priorities. And that's because of the influence that culture has on the way research is governed, the way it's funded, performed, and communicated. Culture also impacts on the career pathways of researchers. And importantly, the culture of a research system influences the quality of its outputs and outcomes. So we want to discuss how we can all help create a research culture that is positive, inclusive, and honest. It requires us all to work together to find the best way to achieve goals and good research outputs, while at the same time respecting others and approaching our work with integrity. Today, we're going to explore some key aspects that can contribute to better research practice and a positive research culture. These topics span many areas that the HRB has been leading on in Ireland for some time now, from research integrity, open science, public patient and carer involvement, to data management and research assessment. We've lots to learn from each other, and I hope you'll participate actively in the conversations throughout the day. It's also essential that we know how to get the best from ourselves, and how we approach this is really important. So I'm encouraged to see a session on earning your stripes without burning yourself out, especially as we move towards a more blended working approach in the future. It's going to be increasingly important to strike a balance between work and life, and I look forward with interest to hear what advice Ian and Jennifer can give during their interview. Ones to Watch, by its very name, indicates that you are the emerging researchers who will shape the future of health research. We look forward to working with you in the years to come as we build capacity for academic researchers and for health and social care practitioners to respond to current and emerging health research needs. Finally, I'd like to thank all of those who submitted entries to this year's Ones to Watch Science Communication competition. The standard of entries was incredibly high, so congratulations to all 4 finalists whose entries are going to be played during the course of the day. And of course, we look forward later on to finding out who this year's winner is. So with that, I hope you enjoy the conference. And I'm going to hand over to our moderator for the event today, Dr. Anna Cody, who is Head of Investigator-Led Grants, Research Careers and Enablers here at the HRB. Over to you, Anna.
Thank you very much, Mairead. Well, welcome everybody. It is a pleasure to be here today and to have a virtual event, if not, unfortunately, a physical one. It is a chance today to share insights of the research environment and of the opportunities for you in your career journey, and to bring you all together. This is the first time that we're hosting this event virtually, and we hope to make this one to remember. We have a number of really exciting speakers lined up who will share their insights into a number of important topics. Mairead has already mentioned a few of those, and we hope that you will find something that will really interest you and that will stimulate thought and discussion. And of course, as Mairead mentioned already, we will have the science competition running throughout the day as well. A couple of housekeeping items to start with. Of course, you can ask questions of all our presenters, and I would ask you to submit your questions using the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen. And during panel sessions, it would be very helpful if you could indicate who this question is for so that it's directed at the right person. And as part of our science communication competition, we would invite you all to vote for the winner as well. We have 4 finalists. They have submitted video entries, which will be aired at 2 different points throughout the day. And once they've all been played, voting will open for 20 minutes at 20 minutes to 3, and it will close at 3 o'clock. And we would ask you in that period to vote for 1 finalist to win. The videos have already been judged by 2 journalists who are also part of the event today, and that's Dr. Claire O'Connell and Jennifer O'Connell, who are chairing different panels today. And their scores, together with your scores here on the day, will be added together to determine the winner. You might also be interested in the HRB's call calendar, and we've put that up on the handout section on the right-hand side of your screen. These are the calls we know about at this point. There might be some others that might emerge following stakeholder discussions, but this is our plan at the moment. Obviously, all calls are subject to approval still, but that's our best guess at the moment. And it would be really helpful if you don't want to miss a call ever, that you subscribed to our notifications from the website. You can share your views and join the conversation on Twitter with the hashtag #OnesToWatch. And it would be great if you would tag us with the handle @HRB Ireland. And lastly, if you have any technical issues, please contact the Live Support Hub, and you can find the red icon at the top right corner of your screen. Okay, that's the housekeeping out of the way. Now into the interesting part of the day. We are starting our event today with a first keynote from Professor Frank Miedema. He is the Vice Rector for Research at Utrecht University, and he's also chair of the Utrecht University Open Science Programme. So he knows an awful lot about the transition to open science, and he'll tell us now about why and how. Please don't forget to submit questions in the Q&A box during the conversation, and over to you, Frank.
Good day. My name is Frank Miedema, and I'm very happy to get this talk to you about the transition to open science. And we're going to discuss rethinking recognition and rewards, because I think with many others that this is a very important aspect of open science, which will enable us to all do open science for the betterment of science and society. Open science, as probably most of you know, has an overall game. It's very ambitious. The aim is to increase the quality, progress, and scientific and societal impact of research and scholarship. And this is indeed very much, say, fueled by the European Union, which started with Carlos Moedas in 2015 and 2016 on a huge program on open science. In fact, they declare that open science should be the standard for science in the European community. And this involves a comprehensive approach, so it involves changing the rewards and incentive systems. I'm going to talk about it at the end of my talk. It will be about research indicators and next generation metrics. How are we going to evaluate science in a better way? Of course, it's about open access and the future of scholarly communication. It's about the open science, European Open Science Cloud. So where are we going to deposit all our data so that it can be, say, fairly approached? So findable, accessible, and interoperable and reusable, fair data idea. And then, of course, it's about integrity, it's about transparency, it's about skills and education. So how are we going to train the PhDs, the postdocs, and even us, of course, our staff in doing and working in the practice of open science. At the end of this list, you see citizen science and public engagement. And for me, that's a little bit of pity, because I think, and I will show that in the slides, the coming slides, that public engagement is the real reason why in Europe and why many people are engaged in open science, because it will increase the relationships and interactions with stakeholders in society, that will enable us to do better science with more impact on society. You can think about clinical, but also science on institutions, democracy, inequality, you name it. Everywhere where we engage with stakeholders, we will have a better agenda. I will argue that in the next slides. In many institutes, and also in our own institute in Utrecht, we have been developing a comprehensive program according to the European setup. So this was started in 2017 in Utrecht, and I'm chairing it since 2019. And this is this is our infographic, and it will be available to you after the meeting. But you can see that what we try to bring science and society more closely together, so that in the future, science and society is basically in the same world, in the same context and environment. So scientists are exposed to problems of the world, and the stakeholders in society can discuss with the people who do research. And therefore, you need, for this public engagement, you need open access, you need fair data and software, and you need, of course, the change in recognition and rewards. And why that is, I will argue with you later. So this is the setup of our program in Utrecht. You can see open access, fair data, public engagement. Here you see the professors in the street on their bicycles, going to the stakeholders in society. And here you see how we signed DORA, which is a sign that we want to really change the recognition and reward system. And the bearded person in the middle is our rector. And you may think, so why do we need to rethink research evaluation? Well, I will make a statement that metrics shape science. So that means that the way we are evaluating science and scientists will dominate also how we will distribute the money, the reputation, the professorships, and this will happen in institutes and also as funders. And this, of course, since everything is a 4-year term, this will induce short-termism. So people will do that type of research that can give results in 4 years. When your funding is ended and you have to go for new funding, then you have at least a couple of papers. This is the game we have all been playing. I have been playing it for 40 years at least. And of course, this is not an academic issue. Also, research with high societal impact, but has a very low score in the type of metrics we use. I will discuss that later. And that type of research has a disadvantage in this system, and is an outlier, because we go, if in this system that we use, applied science is low in esteem compared to basic, and also the social science and humanities have a lower esteem and a lower scoring in the classical system that we use now since 30 years compared to the STEM. And I will show that later on. And this, of course, will set the agenda. It will set the agenda for national institutional research, but also international research. And that means that at this point in time, and this has been empirically discussed and studied by many research groups around the world, the research agenda is not properly reflecting societal and clinical needs, and also not disease burden. I come from the biomedical sciences, and this is something that we have been seeing for many years already. So this is to give you an idea how is this being brought about in the scientific community. But the scientific community is also has a business model, and the business model at this point in time is articles. So if you as a scientist produce articles with a specific number and in specific types of journals with impact factors who have citation scores. And of course, if you get, based on that, these articles, a high amount of funding, then you do well. And then you have good recognition, you get next rounds of money, you have your staff and equipment, and then you can, play the game and produce in the second rounds. So many people like me have been going through this circle game many times in their careers, until they became professor, until they retired, or in my case, until I became the dean. And this, of course, I already showed in the talk, this is not including a lot of input and questions and demands and ideas from outside academia. This is still the case. Open Science is working very hard to bring society into this circle game, you could say, credit cycle, but this is still hard work because this is how we all have been trained. This is how review committees and funders and institutes have been, say, evaluating our research and also our researchers. And this is a strong competition, very much based on individuals, first order, last order, books, and very little room for team science, multidisciplinarity, and diversity. So if you want to really, say, work on the diversity of problems in society, also your staff and also your agenda should have to reflect this diversity. So this is the analysis in very short. There's a lot to be found in the literature, and you can find that, say, if you go at the website I show in the end. In Utrecht, we have been trying to change this, and we have been, say, putting, say, something forward. And there we go from, say very, say, uniquely, you're looking at research. We go to a system where education, research, impact, leadership, and professional performance, everything is brought into the equation. So this is all, say, being measured. And it's not necessarily so that you have to do all of these things very well, or that your research should touch upon all these aspects, but at least some of that, so that we have research portfolios of very different kinds. There will be different kinds of excellences. I will come back to that. And this, of course, is how the system drives eventually, say, what I showed in the first infographic. This is what we have been doing, and we're working with it, and it's now implemented. And I can tell you, this is very difficult because it's really a change of culture. So it's a lot of talk, and you see how I already started speeding up during my talk. In my country, in Holland, in the Netherlands, there are initiatives going along the same line. So we are very happy and we are blessed that also nationally we are in the same with all universities and also with the funders. We go in the same direction. So there's room for everybody's talent. That means there's pluriformity. We realize there's no one ideal metric system for the whole of academia, and we have to find out how we can evaluate research in totally different, say, in places, disciplines, faculties, to give proper and fair, say, evaluations. What we eventually want to do, of course, is to go to this, say, credit cycle. And there, of course, you see there's engagement with societal stakeholders in problem choice, in research and evaluation. This is something that has been practiced in clinical settings. It has been practiced, but also in other settings it has been practiced. But this is not something which is institutional and institutionally a normal thing to do. This is still a little bit strange and sometimes scary. You bring people from outside in that are looking, and they are not scientists. And of course, we go for inclusive indicators. So we go for quality, societal impact, public engagement, academic leadership and culture, and we go for equality, diversity, and inclusion. So this is all the new ideas of also in the Utrecht system, but also in the national system. And mind you, of course, we want to go for open access publishing and fair data sharing. This is also something that has to be, say, in the evaluation system. So you're not, say, rewarded for publishing behind paywalls, but open access, sharing your data as soon as possible. In the end, I'm going to show you a slide, and this is not to be discussed, but we are not alone. There's a huge amount of activity going on in the country, in national, in European settings, at funders. There's an enormous amount of people working on this change now. So what I do is being done by many people around the globe, in Australia, in Singapore, Hong Kong, people are going in this direction, but also in South America and also in sub-Saharan, especially sub-Saharan Africa. So this is a huge global initiative, and I'm very happy to discuss this with you in the coming time. And here I stop my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Frank. That was very, very interesting, very broad sweep of topics that you covered there. There's so much interconnection between those things. Can I ask you? You're mentioning the Dutch initiative to bring in the public into, into deciding what things should be research topics and what should be researched. How successful was that, and how broad a spectrum of people did it reach?
Thank you very much. This is an interesting question. There are, say, two ways to approach. The first one was there was a national science agenda movement that was started in 2016. And it has been a huge success. People came up with all kinds of questions, and they were grouped, and people started to work on it. And also together with the people who asked the questions, stakeholders from society. But in fact, that was just a project. Ideally, of course, if you follow my talk, this should be, say, a normal thing to do. So if you are working on psychiatry, problems in mental health, then it should be very normal to engage with people who have experience, who have, say, patients in the family, who have, say, overcome psychosis, and bring these people in your, say, context. And that is also happening at a larger scale now. And not only in medicine, but also if you study education, bring people who are teachers, bring them in and discuss with them and find out what their needs are. And this can be done for everything. And this is, of course, something that is now brought into the system, also in the incentive and reward system, the recognition and reward system. Because if you are very seriously rewarding people for spending time on it and not only publishing articles, then they will do it and they will feel confident. And the other thing, of course, is this is now also a project which is running at the funders. Also, the funders are stimulating this public engagement in the project that they are now handing out. They want to see it, and they want to see this engagement.
That's brilliant.
Is it easy? No, this is really a culture change.
Yeah, and I'm particularly interested in this because on the one hand, we have a big initiative starting in Ireland, which is similarly asking for the general public to input their research questions, but and that's kind of at a higher level. And in the HRB, we've been working quite a lot over the last number of years to bring the voice of the public and of patients and carers into all research projects that we fund. So that's a very interesting perspective. If you're a young researcher, what does that move to open science mean to you? Because there's a lot of effort involved in it as well. You know, it doesn't just happen.
That's right. I get this question many, many times. Probably every time I get this presentation, and I have more than 10 minutes, so it can be a little bit more relaxed. But the thing is, of course, that yes, this is uncertainty. This definitely is uncertainty. So there will be a new way of evaluating your research. When I grew up, it was just counting articles, looking at, Nature, Science and Cell. Yeah, this is a good guy. Give them the money. That is not. So we have to do it differently. And young people have to trust people like me, the directors and the vice deans and the vice chancellors, that they will all go in this direction. And at the funders, Science Europe, which are all the funders in Europe, they are going in this direction, which I already said in the last slide. And so, there's a lot of uncertainty, but now we see already a lot of, all these people, the funders, also, for instance, the charities, the Dutch Heart Foundation, the Dutch Cancer Foundation, they all want to go in this direction because they don't want papers. They want significant knowledge for the people that they work with. And significant knowledge is something really different than a paper. Because a paper in Nature doesn't cure a patient. It has to be implemented, evaluated, and it has to be brought into the context. And this is what's happening. Young people, I can only say, trust your own intuition and also your own feeling for what's good to do, what is good research that you want to do. And there's a lot of opportunity now coming. And this is why I'm also happy to speak in Ireland or in Iceland or in Litauen, Lithuania, where we were. Everybody is asking the same questions. And yes, you're in good company. There's a huge international movement. In the European community, this is the thing that is going to be how we do science. This is the way we do science.
And there's a question here from the audience asking, what are the steps to change the mindset of most senior academics who have been working in the traditional system and who mightn't, you might need a little bit of convincing?
I think we have to take them. We have to discuss. We have to show them what has happened to the system. They have to. Most of the times, it's giving examples. For instance, my favorite example is I come from biomedicine. We studied, for instance, the origins of stroke, and that is all pathogenesis, high church research, top journals. But studying, say, 90% of the people who survive stroke, they have to be, say, also treated. They have to be helped they have to for rehabilitation, and they have to get to be sure and to have also quality of life again. And that's very good. That type of research is sort of low church. It doesn't get a paper in Nature and Science and so. And so our system has been, say, disadvantaging the people who work on rehabilitation after stroke, and has advantaged the people who do the more basic thing. And if you discuss that with people who are, say, who have the same experiences hands-on, and it's the same for sociology and psychology in the humanities, it's everywhere the same, then people say, yeah, you're right. Yeah, this is not fair, and it's not help agenda. And some people are just against. Okay, that can be. But most people, my experience is that many people see the issue. But like the young people, it gives a lot of uncertainty. So some people say to me, and this is my last sentence, some people to me, so are you arguing that I made a career based on, say, worthless papers? and I have to say, no. You know that's not the case. That's not the case. But we have been overvaluing that type of output, and we have undervalued all the wonderful excellences of research.
That is very true. Can I ask you another question that was posed from the audience? That's making the distinction between funding agencies, who I think quite a few of them are beginning to very much try to address this issue and look at other metrics. But then also the institutional level, the employer of researchers, where change can sometimes be a bit slower, or that seems to be the Irish experience. How do you bridge that gap?
Yeah, I think the short answer, which is of course say also a political answer, is in fact Wellcome Trust. They spend huge amounts of money on biomedical sciences, and they have this now as sort of requirements. So this is the way they want to see their project being done. And I've been also in those boards, in those evaluation committees. So if the funders say, okay, we can fund research at your institution, but you should comply with our ideas about how it should be evaluated, and please know how we evaluate your research. Then I think many institutions, many say universities, even the Oxford and Cambridge of this world, they will go and change in this direction, and we see that happening. And of course, they feel that they lose their own independent position, so they have now to listen to what the funders are saying. But eventually, this is happening, and I think also people realize that this is a good thing to do. But it's for many people, this is really a cultural change. So the idea about excellence, the real issue is who determines quality, excellence, good science, bad science, and that's of course something you have to discuss over and over and over again. And that's exactly
and it's changing over time as well, I suppose. The perception of what is good science.
It's extremely context dependent as well.
It is. There's one really interesting question here that I'd like to put to you for a very quick answer, if you may, before we finish this session. Which is a move forward to a more societal importance focus versus is very welcome. Existing funding metrics may be much easier to measure, though, than a more holistic perspective. Is there a risk of the new metrics, the new approach, will just become another set of hurdles rather than a more effective way of allocating funding? Bit provocative at the end.
There's a short answer. It is more time to discuss and to read and to really understand science than to count articles. That's for sure. But that proxy, that's really a very bad proxy, and we shouldn't use it. It's unfair, basically. So you have to spend more time on reading. And if you go to the standard evaluation protocol, which is also on my last slide, so we give examples of how narratives can be used to explain science, and also how narratives can be used to evaluate. And narratives can also be very critical. So it's all, and that's also fair, because then you have to explain why you think somebody has a good research output compared to somebody who is not, and not only giving a number, say it's a 4 or a 2. No, why is it a 4 or why is it the top 5? And you have to really explain and be transparent about it, because everybody can read your arguments. And so it's a little bit more work, but people get used to it and get better. But this is really what science is all about: discussing content with your peers to come to a better and also research evaluation. My last sentence: research evaluations are also transformative. They can also help you to go to do it better and to get advice, not only to be judged, but also to be helped and to go in together in a better direction. It's more work, but it's better. It's better.
I'd very much support that statement. Frank, thank you so much. That was a very, very interesting and thought-provoking discussion. Thank you. And thank you for those questions from the audience as well.
I thank you.
And I would now like to move over to the next part of our program, which is all about grant writing. So that's a nice segue from the last question. I would like to introduce the new two speakers together. Our first speaker of this group of two is Dr. Anne Costello. She is project officer with us in the HRB, and she will share top tips for grant writing from a funder's experience and perspective. And after Anne's presentation, we'll see the presentation from Professor Sofia Janowska-Lighthouse from the Wellcome Center for Mitochondrial Research in Newcastle University. And she will talk about her experience as a panel reviewer and what makes a grant application stand out. So both of them, we'll see two short videos from those two presenters, and then there'll be a discussion where both of them will be joining me together. So again, if you could please send your questions in the Q&A box, then we can start with Anne's presentation, please.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ones to Watch 2021. My name is Anne Costello, and I'm a project officer at the Health Research Board. I work on the academic portfolio of health research careers supported by the HRB, and this includes student scholarships, HRB postdoctoral fellowships, that's the ARP call, the Emerging Investigator Awards, EIA, and the Research Leader Awards, amongst others. So I'm here today to give you my perspective on what makes a good research proposal. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, I'd like to pose a question. What is a fundable research proposal? So if we just think about that for a second, at minimum, you want to ensure that the research you propose is fundable, obviously, but you also have to think about the fact that fundable research proposals, not all fundable research proposals can be funded. So therefore your proposal needs to be not only fundable, but also competitive. So if you can put together a proposal which hits all the marks, so if you can make a case for why your research matters, if you have all of the expertise required, if you can propose an appropriate and feasible way to do the research, and if you can articulate with confidence how the outputs of your research will make a difference to the community, then you are well on your way. So I am going to try to break that down into some top tips for grant writing. So tip one is to be prepared, know what is expected, and understand the requirements. Read the guidelines for the call. They've literally been written specifically for you, and I can tell you there is nothing in that document that isn't important. Know the scope. Be sure that you don't accidentally propose a project that's out of scope for the call. If you're not sure whether your proposal is borderline or not, just contact us, contact the HRB. You'll be very confident that you are eligible to apply before you write your application. I suggest that you use your time effectively. Contact the research office, use the supports available to you. You know, that might include talking to more experienced researchers, identifying a mentor who can guide you, not only with this particular application, but through your research career. And if you do that, your mentor will undoubtedly change over time and through the course of your career, and you may have more than one giver and one mentor at any given time. But mentorship is important, and it's a really good idea to have a career guide regardless of your career stage. And in fact, the HRB requests that research leaders include a minimum of one mentor in their research leader application. Don't miss the submission deadline. and be aware that there may be local university deadlines some days in advance of the HRB closing of the closing date. So, I've come across so many applicants who didn't realize that it's the research office who approves and submits your application. So when you actually hit the submit button, you are submitting to the university research office, not the HRB. And that, that's really a mistake you don't want to make a few minutes before a call deadline. Tip 2 is to have a clear research question. Make sure it's succinct and to the point. Do a review. Don't propose research which has already been done or which somebody else is currently doing. Make sure you know the research landscape in your field. Your question really should address a gap in the knowledge. You should articulate very clearly why the research is important. What will the results enable? What will change in your field? Change in the world. Your research question should be answerable with the research design that you propose. And that brings me nicely to the next point, which is tip number 3. Ensure your research design is appropriate. Your objectives are what link your research question with your research design. And that in turn leads onto your research deliverables. So it's very important that your objectives address the research question that you have proposed. They should be clear and to the point with very little scope for misinterpretation. Your objectives are also what you will use to define exactly what methodology is most appropriate to generate the results that you're looking for. Your methodology should be current and not dated, but now you need to understand this. This does not mean that you should only use methodology developed recently. No. So while you want to make sure that the methodology you're proposing is the most up-to-date in terms of the appropriateness for your research, you need to keep in mind that the most appropriate and up-to-date methodology may actually have been developed quite a while ago, but it may still be the gold standard. And if that's the case, then that's okay. Basically, the methodology you propose should be fit for purpose with the appropriate expertise available on the research team. If you don't have the experience yourself with a certain technique, make sure that someone on your research team does. Tip 4 is to ensure your deliverables are realistic. Deliverables, they should be ambitious, but realistic in terms of what can be achieved within the timeframe of the project. You should differentiate very clearly between what is proposed to be achieved during the project and what is projected to be achieved as next steps after the project. Be very clear what the requested funding will actually support. It's always a good idea to address potential risks within your project and to provide some mitigation against any issues that might arise, and we're all aware that they frequently can. Tip 5 is to have the right people involved. Ensure that there is appropriate expertise within your team to support all aspects of the research. Be sure on what the specific contribution of each participant is. So whether they are a co-applicant or a collaborator, ensure you include their specific contribution to the research proposed. Know all the players. Be aware of who's working in the area, both globally and nationally, and who's leading in the field. If you do choose to include or have the option to include leaders in the field in your proposal, I suggest that you ensure their actual contribution to your research proposal is very clear. You may think it's great to have a big name on your proposal, and it can be, but be aware that naming somebody important without actually defining what they will contribute is a red flag for a reviewer. Tip 6 is to know the assessment criteria. The reviewers of your proposal will be assessing it based on a specific set of assessment criteria. So you should write your proposal with those criteria at the very front of your mind. Make sure you use your word count effectively to provide as much critical detail as possible to enable an effective review of your proposal. Tip 7 is know your audience. Write for international reviewers who are not familiar with the situation in Ireland. Make sure you set the scene and ensure that the Irish context is clearly outlined. Write the lay summary for the lay person. Make sure your patient and public involvement is valid and appropriate. So did PPI play a role in the development of your research question, for example? Possibly should have. Tip 8 is to propose a realistic and appropriate budget. Justify your budget. Why do you need what you're requesting? Write it down. Know what's eligible to request in your budget. Not all funding calls are created equally when it comes to budgets. Budget for an appropriate level of open access dissemination. Not too much, not too little. Talk to the research office or the finance office, as they may be able to direct you if you're not sure, particularly if you don't have much experience in writing budgets. Tip 9 is to pay attention to detail. Make sure you give all sections of the application form adequate attention. Use the word count effectively. Don't waste it. Stay on point. Ensure all related supporting documentation is included. Proofread your application before you submit it. Avoid typos. They're not a good look. Tip 10 is to be aware of common pitfalls. So in my experience, these are some of the most common pitfalls that I've come across, and I'm going to go through them quite quickly. An applicant is not eligible. Co-applicant or collaborator is not eligible. The application is not eligible. It doesn't fit into the scope of the grant call. The applicant did not fully read or understand the purpose of the funding call. There were gaps of expertise in the applicant team. The proposed content was not relevant to the research question. The project plan was not cohesive. Potential impact was not adequately articulated. The applicant did not write with the reviewers in mind. The project and timelines were too ambitious. PPI sections were not planned correctly. So there is a lot there, but if you are aware of the common pitfalls, then you can avoid them. The last tip then is to show enthusiasm for your research. Your passion really should shine through, because you're not a robot with a request. You are a researcher with a desire to create new knowledge and make a difference in the world. So if any of you are planning on writing a research application, the HRB does have a great resource of grant writing tips on the website at this link. So I guess that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to you and say what makes a grant application stand out from the perspective of a reviewer. So obvious things are follow the rules. Are you applying to the right place? Is it a local charity? Does it have a strategic priority in what you're interested in? Do you match the eligibility criteria? Check on those simple things: font size, type, don't make it too small. Are you allowed to put figures in? Do they want a Gantt chart? Would a Gantt chart help? And if you're not allowed to insert those, is an appendix allowed? Check all those details. But most importantly, your grant has got to be clear. What makes it easy for your reader? Befriend them. Clarity, but purpose and feasibility, all crucial aspects. So for clarity, short sentences. I was once told by an expert reviewer, 23 words maximum length for a sentence. Not sure why, but short sentences definitely make you focus and make you consider how to make things clear. If you use abbreviations, make sure you define them. And your audience is not going to be full of specialists all interested in your scientific niche, so avoid too much specialist jargon. Where you can, use figures or flowcharts to break up the text so that you get a nice balance, if you're allowed to use them, so that 5 pages of text is quite hard work to read. But if you've illustrated it with things that make it clearer, your reader will be happy. So what do those figures want to show? Well, what the point that you're trying to get across is really important. Don't just throw them in for the sake of it. Will that figure help you save some words? Is it going to make something slightly clearer? Is your figure clear? Have you actually written a legend? And make sure you refer to it. It's extraordinary how many times a figure is in there, but with no reference to it in the main text. So I don't know why I'm looking at it. Make your figures engaging. What catches the eye but conveys the message you want it to? I work on mitochondria, different aspects of it, and these are different pictures. So electron micrograph on the left, ultrastructure. So one of the questions I look at is, where is the translational machinery within that ultrastructure? Wouldn't help if I put the picture on the right, but it would if I was talking about the network. The fact that it's dense around the nucleus, the fact that fission and fusion change the status and the dynamics of that network. Make sure your figure's relevant and useful. But also, so is your experiment. Just because you can do it doesn't make it worthwhile. You need to get over your vision, the impact of doing that. Is it just your scientific curiosity, or is this meaningful? experiment? Is it going to give us something really important in terms of data? Purpose. That purpose is crucial, but it has to be built on scientific quality. So you want a nice storyline. So is this going to be based on something that is an extension of work you've just published? Have you just published it, or is it 5 years ago? So what makes it timely now? Is it somebody else that's published something that's a parallel, but really helps put forward why your project is important? Is your project based on a hypothesis, or are you just fishing? So what is that based on? Is that preliminary data you're going to submit? That always helps. Always helps to have preliminary data. It's not that you just published anything, you've got nothing left to do. You're showing that there's still scope. And what are the aims that are going to test that hypothesis? Make sure that they do. And what will happen as a consequence? What are the expected outcomes? Are you definitely going to get this amount of data that will be publishable come what may? Or is it what we would hope to learn? Make sure that we know what it is you're expecting to get from this. And where's that impact going to be? Is it global? Is it national? Or you've applied to a local charity and therefore it's going to have local impact. And that's important to state. Is the impact also going to be on the quality of training for your team, their career development, your own career development towards independence, and the team building? Those are important things that the reviewer wants to know you've considered. So that's all fine, but can you do it? Not is this doable, but can you do it? Have you got that preliminary data to show credibility? Have you got the experience and the skills that are needed to drive this? And are you in the right environment? Are there people around that can support you intellectually, technically? Have you got the right facilities available in that particular environment? Are there collaborators in the lab next door? Or have you already established an international network that's going to make sure this can happen? But what might stop it happening? What are the risks? Have you thought about those? We want to know that you have, because if you've 3 aims and 2 depends on 1 and 3 depends on 2, if 1 doesn't work, the whole lot comes down. So what are the risks? Have you got contingency plans to make sure that whatever happens, you will still learn something? Make sure that's clear. And have you got enough money to do it? Are the costs appropriate? And are they eligible? Are they realistic? Make sure you can justify them. You've just said you're in the best place to do this work. It's got all of the newest mass specs. It's got all the sequencing facilities. And then you go and ask for another mass spec. And they're not going to pay for that. Just be sensible. Travel, yeah, great, good for career development, group leaders and your team. But where are you going to send them? Do those conferences actually fall within the time period that you're asking for your grant to run? Which ones are they? Why are they relevant? Give names of conferences and dates if you know they're already out there. It's much better to have that clearly stated rather than aspirational, and actually that doesn't really help me know that you're planning. All of the data you're going to generate, is it imaging data that's going to be vast? Where are you going to store that? Do you have a management plan? Does your institute or university provide all of that for you? Free? Or have you included the costs of that storage? Important questions, but most important is the scientific quality. And Nature recently had a couple of articles about writing grants, so very timely. And I've put the links in here so you can look at them at your leisure, but I have pinched a few things from there. So again, they focus on, is this hypothesis driven, or are you just having a quick look-see? And are your aims clearly addressing that hypothesis? And they have this 3-question framework. Where are those limitations again? What is it that's going to stop you being able to achieve? And these are often in the methods. So justify what those methods are and that those limitations are not going to stop you being able to do your experiment. Are these standard things in the lab, even though they're tricky? Make sure the grant reviewer knows that they are there and ready to be used. But why are they the best ones? So justify what it is you're using in order to test your hypothesis. and how that will, if necessary, overcome the limitations of that method. So they illustrate this, and again, this is pinched from that one of those articles. So you need to make sure that they can see clearly, me as a reviewer, that you're going to get data that is valid. It's minimized bias, it's maximized as much as you can possibly learn. And this particular example was about mouse models. So it wasn't clear to the reviewer from the text on the left, we will use the stroke mouse model and treat the mice with our novel compound daily for 3 weeks. And the reviewer's going, but why that mouse model? And why are you dosing them daily? Rephrasing it to say, as it is on the right, we will use the stroke mouse model, a system that we and others have shown to be relevant. So now we know that it's a good stroke model, and we're going to do this to test the effects of the novel therapeutic compounds. Much slightly longer, so you've got to save your words somewhere else, but at least they know why you're using that mouse model and why the daily dosing. So clarity and justification of the science. So from a reviewer's perspective, when I read a grant, I want it to be clear. I want to know why you're doing it. I want to be excited by the prospect of it, but it's got to be easy to read. Being a non-specialist to have a look through, that's who's going to look at your grant. So they will get a much better idea of whether your message is clear. Always check for typos, formatting errors. Make sure you haven't missed anything out, and get advice from people who have been successful in writing grants, not just those who put lots in, but that have been awarded them. And make sure that your enthusiasm for your particular science comes across. So they are, it's an exciting thing for your reviewer to read. Okay, and with that, I think I'm done. Thank you.
Brilliant. That was really, really exciting, and it rings so true. It really reflects my experience of sitting in panels, and I've sat in many panels over the years. Can I ask Sophia a first question? You were talking about including reflection on risk in your application. And I mean, we've just come through a period where nobody foresaw that particular risk of everything being shut down. But, you know, what should you include, and what's appropriate? How could you mitigate?
Yes, I think it's really important. In some cases, I thought Anne and I covered some very similar points, and some of the grants actually ask for a risk assessment. And yes, what do you put in? As you say, COVID was totally unexpected, but now that we've experienced that, I don't think it would be unreasonable to indicate that should there be another event that causes the lab to close, that you still have things that you could achieve. And nowadays, when many grants are data rich, there's a lot of data mining that could be done at a distance. And if that's possible, then I think that's worth indicating. I think other really important things to note are, if your first aim is generating tools that are going to enable you to facilitate the rest of the program, it's crucial that should those tools either take longer than expected or don't do what you want them to do, that you have another approach in mind that will still drive the topic in the right direction and generate meaningful data, but just using different technology. So I think that especially if aims build on each other, mitigating the risks at an early stage is crucial to outline.
Brilliant. I have an audience question here from Claire asking again, Sophia, what are your pet hates that you see frequently in applications as a reviewer?
Yeah, it's interesting that the gentleman that advised these 23 words in a sentence also said, this is a word you want to avoid at all costs. The number of times a sentence will begin with, this shows that, and the preceding sentence the word this could relate to 3 different aspects of it. So actually, you don't know what it is that this is leading you towards. So again, I wouldn't say it's a pet hate, but having been told that many years ago, every time I see this, I think, have they actually justified what they're talking about? So perhaps avoid this. One of the things I really don't like is inconsistency. So I work on ribosomes. They consist of 2 subunits. I've read things where subunit is written as one word, as a hyphenated, or as 2 separate subunit. And that lack of consistency is trivial, but it does set you thinking as to how clearly and accurate and meticulously that particular individual is towards their actual work.
Yeah. And, you know, whilst every funder will have assessment criteria for the grants, and, you know, we go to great lengths to continuously remind reviewers and panel members that this is what we focus on, it's sometimes those impressions can, you know, somehow influence the overall assessment, not so much in a direct way of scoring somebody down for that, but more in a more subtle way, that maybe there's a sharper eye cast on other aspects. So and it's hard to totally take that aspect out of it.
I quite agree, but I think it is also, although it is subtle, I think it can be an indicator of meticulousness, and that is crucial in a scientist.
Yeah. Anne, a question for you. We have already sort of touched on those aspects of other aspects that might feed into assessment, but you're also talking about the common pitfalls, and you're mentioning there that an applicant could misinterpret the objective of a call. What did you mean by that?
Well, sometimes we do find that, particularly as I work on the health research careers portfolio, many of those awards would be career-based. So while the research is important, it's also important to look at the person's career development and those aspects. So what we do find is that sometimes in career development awards, or if, I suppose an example would be if somebody is applying for a PhD program, they want to run a PhD program, or they're looking for a career development award, or an emerging investigator award, which is partially going to be improving their career, that they can write it as a programmatic award and actually forget to put in the information that the reviewers will require in terms of their career development. So it can be something that applicants will trip up on because they haven't actually looked at the aim of the actual funding call. So that's something that they need to know. And that's why I say read the guidance notes and make sure that you know what the actual aim of the funding call is and that you address that in your proposal. Don't write a programmatic award if it's a career development.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's a very important point. We are coming towards the end of our time, but I see sort of there's another question that is rated highly, which is around what resources are available to help when planning for PPI in grant proposals, and are there any common pitfalls? And I suppose one of the things you mentioned already was the lay summary. The HRB in many award schemes will have a public review. So that lay summary will be read by a lay person. So make it lay, you know, and ideally maybe have a PPI contributor write it for you and or prove it for you. But and what other aspects would you see?
In terms of the PPI?
Yeah.
So we all know that PPI is hugely important in the development of any research question, because you want to make sure that your research question is actually going to address the patients down the line and their quality of life and their treatment. So PPI is really important at let's say if it's a scientific, if it's a lab-based research proposal, it's really important in the development of the question. But if you're looking at sort of a health services research proposal where you're looking at a care pathway, it's important to have that PPI contribution, scientific contribution and contributor contribution through the whole development of the research proposal. It could be 3 years, it could be 4 or 5 years, and it's important to have that input through the whole course in that instance. and you can have PPI contributors on your proposal. Sometimes it's a good idea to have them as collaborators, but if you want somebody with PPI expertise who can actually guide you in how to deal with your PPI contributors, then you may want those as co-applicants.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. There are loads more questions that I could ask and we could go on for a long time, but unfortunately I'll have to draw this session to a close. Thank you very much, Anne and Sophia, and also to all those who submitted questions. We are now moving into a 10-minute break, and when we'll come back from that break, we'll see the first two videos of our 4 science communication competition finalists. So be sure to be back on time for 11 o'clock